Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
In the middle of the night, a 14-year-old African-American boy was kidnapped from his family's home. His battered, badly decomposing body was pulled out from a river 3 days later. 2 white men were later charged in connection to the teenager's death, but justice was hard to find for African Americans living in Mississippi in 1955. Still, there would be moments of courage shown at the trial from a judge who, by many accounts, tried to keep the court proceedings fair, a prosecution who earnestly tried to present a case, and a black man who stood his ground on the witness stand and testified against the white defendants. The boy's murder would build momentum for the civil rights movement, a fight for equal rights that's still ongoing 65 years later. This case is one that has always stuck with me. Maybe it's in part because I grew up just down the street from where that very boy was buried. It's a name you have likely heard, especially lately, but may not know too much about. Today, I want to take a deeper look and go back in time to the Emmett Till case. This is Jillian, and you are listening to Court Junkie, episode 130. Nowadays, I think many of us would rather color our hair in the comfort of our own home. But if you're like me, you're likely wondering how you would find the right color and how much does it cost. Well, Madison Reed makes coloring your hair at home affordable, and they give you the tools you need to choose your perfect color. Madison Reed takes coloring your hair at home to the next level and gives you beautiful, professional hair color delivered right to your door, starting at just $22. There used to be only 2 options for coloring your hair. You could either try outdated at-home color or spend time and money at a salon. Not anymore. Madison Reed's color is unique. It's crafted by master colorists who blend nuances of light, dark, cool, and warm tones to create over 55 gorgeous multidimensional shades. And finding the perfect shade is easy. You just go to their website, madison-reed.com, and take their quick online quiz that will ask you questions about your hair, like what you want your end result to be, what your hair texture is, and then they match you with your perfect shade. So do your hair coloring at home and look as if you just came from the salon. Now, Court Junkies can get 10% off plus free shipping on their first color kit by using the code COURT. Go to madison-reed.com and use the code COURT. That's madison-reed.com and use the code COURT. After I'm done working for the day, and after I've played with my daughter and put her off to sleep, I often just want to give my brain a break. It's the end of the night, and I finally have a few free minutes by myself. So what do? I sneak in a few levels of Best Fiends. Best Fiends is this infamously impossible-to-put-down puzzle game that you can play right on your phone. My favorite thing about it is how visual it is and how adorable all the little characters are. I have played well over 100 levels, and Christy from Canadian True Crime and I even have a friendly little competition going. Best Fiends has over 100 million downloads. It's free to download and has literally millions of 5-star reviews on the Apple App Store and Google Play. More levels, events, and challenges get added all the time, so you never have to worry about getting bored or of running out of levels to play. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R, Best Fiends. Who was Emmett Till, beyond a murder victim and a posthumous civil rights figure, whose name appears in the history books alongside Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders?
We know a lot about him, not only from the news accounts written about the case back in 1955, but a lot of speaking engagements that his mother participated in and led, and a memoir that she wrote in 2003, and other memoirs that have been written by people who knew Emmett Till when he was a young boy. So we get a picture of him as kind of a fun-loving young kid with a great sense of humor, a big personality, and someone who was known to be kind in the neighborhood, known to be very helpful, very close to his mother. And so we get a picture of a regular 14-year-old boy from Chicago who well-liked by his friends, a popular young man. My name is Chris Metris, and I teach at Samford University in Birmingham, and published 2 books on the Emmett Till case, one back in 2002 called The Lynching of Emmett Till. It's an anthology about the case, and then I edited a collection of essays that look at literary representations of the murder, and that was published in 2008.
Emmett's mother was born in rural Mississippi, but she moved away from home years earlier. She was now a single mother raising her son Emmett in Chicago, but she never lost her ties to the Deep South, where her relatives still lived. In 1955, Mose Wright, Emmett's great-uncle, visited them in Illinois, re-sparking Emmett's interest in the South, a place he hadn't gone back to since he was a child. The 9th grader was eager to get reacquainted with Mississippi and his southern cousins.
He's actually supposed to go that summer on a trip with his mother out west, but because Emmett is interested in going to Mississippi, hasn't really been there for a while, he's interested in going down. At the last minute, his mother agrees to let him visit Mississippi.
Before Emmett left on the train for Mississippi, his mother warned him about the Deep South. They lived on the south side of Chicago, where Emmett rarely interacted with white people. It seemed likely that Emmett was unfamiliar with the written and unwritten rules of the Jim Crow South, where there was an entrenched culture of racism, where lynchings were a time for joyful family gatherings and a way for white people to assert their control over black people, even though the Civil War and slavery were long since over. Emmett's mother, Mamie Bradley, testified in court. Quote, "I told him when he was coming down here that he would have to adapt himself to a new way of life, and I told him to be very careful about how he spoke and to whom he spoke, and to always remember to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, at all times." That's how, in August 1955, Emmett Till found himself hundreds of miles away from home in the rural Mississippi Delta, where the landscape was large plantations with black people working as sharecroppers. A few months earlier, a man who lived in the area was the first black person to register to vote, and then was killed by a shotgun with no one ever facing charges, according to the FBI. This was the place where Emmett was on a 2-week trip, spending time with his cousins while staying with his Uncle Mose.
And they're working during the day a little bit, but they're also, like teenagers, having fun while he's on his visit to Mississippi. But one afternoon on a Wednesday, they decide they want to go to a local store that's run by a local man named Roy Bryant and his wife, Carolyn. And so on that afternoon while they're visiting, again, a lot of the details are still not quite fully known, but we do know that at some point Emmett goes into the store, and at that moment, the only person in the store is Carolyn Bryant. And something kind of happens between Emmett and Caroline that causes some disturbance and disruption, and Emmett kind of comes out of the store, and Carolyn Bryant's clearly upset by something. And again, counts differ about maybe what happened, but at some point, Emmett Till kind of offers a wolf whistle in the direction of Carolyn Bryant. And it's clear that this is inappropriate behavior. Emmett Till then and his cousins kind of get in their car and they go off. And it's clear that something has happened between the two of them that's controversial. Later that night, Emmett doesn't really tell. Emmett and his cousins don't tell Moses Wright about what happened at the store. But it takes a couple days later, and it's clear that Carolyn Bryant's husband has found out about this encounter that Emmett Till has with Carolyn Bryant in the store on that Wednesday.
A few days later, unwanted visitors came unannounced in the middle of the night while Emmett slept. It was Carolyn's husband, Roy Bryant, and Roy's half-brother, J.W. Milam. They were two longtime members of the community, although they lacked elite status.
They're white working class people. The Bryant, Caroline, and Roy run that store. J.W. Milam works for a variety of people in the community, mostly kind of overseeing African-American workers and on plantations. So they're white working class people, but they're well known in the community.
Roy Bryant had been on the road, hauling shrimp to Texas, when his wife Carolyn was alone in Bryant Grocery and Meat Market. When Roy returned back to Mississippi, he heard the story of the inappropriate exchange his wife had had with the teenager. Now he was going to take action against him.
I think it's about 2 o'clock in the morning. They arrive, knock on the door, tell Mose Wright that they're there to find the boy that had done the talking, I think is the phrase they use. And there's really nothing that Mose Wright can do. He can't really prevent them from coming into the house and taking Emmett Till.
When Emmett didn't return home, his relatives sounded the alarm. They contacted the sheriff's office to report him missing. Back in Chicago, Emmett's mother was alerted about what happened. The story of the kidnapped boy began making national headlines. 3 days after Emmett was taken, a teenager fishing in the Tallahatchie River made a terrible discovery. Emmett's body surfaced in the water. A 75-pound cotton gin fan was tied with barbed wire onto the body's neck, according to a 2006 FBI report. Why had Emmett Till died? For flirting, whistling, touching a woman's hand, or making a comment? What actually happened in the store would remain a question over the years, Carolyn Bryant's account eroding over time as the truth was finally revealed, coming too late to make a difference.
Now, in 2020, we now know that there's a lot of questions and skepticism that what he was accused of doing, which was whistling at a white woman and grabbing her hand and flirting with her while she was working in her family store. There's questions as to whether or not that actually happened. For too long, I think we focus on, what Emmett did or did not do, and we don't ever really seem to take the time to thoroughly understand the level of depravity that had to exist in Roy Bryant and UW Milam to have done what they did to a 14-year-old boy for several hours before finally shooting him and throwing him in the river.
Legal and social justice scholar Ayesha Bell Hardaway said the backdrop of Emmett's death was the reality that Black people were still being lynched in America.
I teach at the law school at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm also the co-director of the university's Social Justice Institute. I would say that at that time there was no social justice to speak of as we think of it today, but we know that there were, from the period of Reconstruction, right, so after the Civil War, from when the emancipation of slaves, of people that had been enslaved, until the 1950s, there's now documented evidence of widespread terror lynchings that were occurring throughout the South. At that point in time, it wasn't viewed as despicable. Instead, it was viewed as the appropriate amount of vigilante justice, obviously all designed to reinforce the racial hierarchy, subordination, domination, right, that is essential to prop up white supremacy. And so in order for white people to maintain their rightful place at the top, as they view it, right, their rightful place at the top of the hierarchy, they did things like this in order to, quote unquote, keep Black people in their place.
According to the NAACP, at least 4,743 known lynchings occurred in the United States between 1882 and 1968. The majority of the victims were Black. Countless other deaths likely happened but weren't recorded, so it's hard to know the true historic death toll. Lynchings appeared in newspaper stories that advertised the time and date, inviting white people and their families to witness the events, turning them into a public spectacle.
And these were well-attended events that sometimes brought thousands of white people to watch these spectacle lynchings. These terroristic events often made the front page of newspapers. Food vendors sold goods at these events, and families picnicked with their dinners and smiled with enthusiasm while posing for pictures that were then widely disseminated and put on postcards and things like that. Emmett Till, 14 years old, he is another example of one of these terroristic lynchings or killings.
Emmett's body was taken to a funeral home catering to African Americans. There, on August 31st, 1955, Dr. L.B. Atkin, a longtime physician from Greenwood, Mississippi, examined the decomposing body. He testified about the extent of the injuries later at trial. His testimony is graphic of the horrors he saw from the decomposition and the torture that Emmett endured before he died. Quote, "This body was badly swollen, badly bloated, and I would estimate. Now, as I previously stated, I did not touch this body. I want to make that plain to you. But I would estimate that this body would have weighed 275 pounds. It was that badly bloated. The skin and the flesh was beginning to slip on it. The head was badly mutilated. The right eye was protruding, and the tongue was protruding from the mouth." Dr. Atkin observed a round hole that went into the skull, although he wasn't sure if it was a bullet hole or not. And behind the left ear, the head was badly crushed in as if by some blunt object, he said. There was a mark around the neck, as if something had been tied around it. It appeared to go all the way around, he said. Robert B. Smith III was the special assistant to the district attorney. He asked the doctor at trial, "Doctor, in your opinion, did the injuries or wounds around the head look as if they might have been sufficient to cause his death?" "I would say so," Dr. Atkin said. "I signed a death certificate in blank. I did not identify the body. As I remember, I stated that this was a body supposed to have been taken from the river, and it had a hole above the right ear and the left side of the skull was crushed in." Emmett's mother, Mamie Bradley, insisted her son's body be sent back to Chicago for the funeral.
And they seal the casket, and they put a local undertaker kind of puts a tag on it that seal is not to be broken. And so Emmett Till's body is shipped by train back to Chicago. And when Mamie Till meets her son's body at the station, she insists that the casket be opened so that she can see her son. And, you know, some of the officials there really don't want to do this because they're not supposed to. The casket is sealed. But she convinces the local undertaker to open up the casket. And, of course, she's absolutely horrified by what she sees. And then she makes a momentous decision that her son will have an open casket funeral. And that decision, which must have been incredibly painful for her, tens of thousands of Chicagoans come to the funeral over several days to see Emmett Till's body. It is covered in the papers, African American press across the country. Jet magazine publishes a photo of Emmett Till, his face, and that has a profound impact, not just in the case, but for an entire generation of African Americans, particularly those who were coming of age in the 1950s. That decision to have an open casket funeral, the decision to allow her son's photo to be distributed in newspapers, it's really one of the reasons why, in large part, this event becomes what we know as, what many people call the spark to the civil rights movement. That image, that funeral, that decision have a profound effect on the civil rights movement.
Lewis Woods, an associate history professor at Middle Tennessee State University, also talked about how influential Emmett's mother was for insisting that an open casket be displayed at the funeral.
Emmett Till was an ordinary kid. You know, the likelihood that he would be remembered if he didn't fall to this, very difficult and tragic end is small, right? But his mom, Mamie Till, was so inspirational for the civil rights movement because she wanted, quote, the world to know what they did to my boy. That's what she said. And she made an open casket so that everybody could see the ugliness of white supremacy. And it was an image that ran in Jet magazine, which is a major magazine in the Black community. A generation of African Americans had that image seared into their brains. Like, they couldn't unsee that image.
With the discovery of Emmett's body, authorities quickly arrested Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam. But would Emmett's family get justice? Halloween is coming up, and although many of us like being scared this time of year, one thing I think we'd all like to be less scary is life insurance. Shopping for life insurance can seem like an impossible and scary thing to do, but Policy Genius makes it easy. With a cutting-edge insurance marketplace and help from licensed experts, they will save you time and money. Did you know that right now you could save 50% or more by using Policy Genius to compare life insurance? It's easy. Here's how. First, head to policygenius.com. In minutes, you can work out how much coverage you need and compare quotes from top insurers to find your best price. Policy Genius will compare policies starting at as little as $1 a day. You might even be eligible to skip the in-person medical exam. Once you apply, the Policy Genius team will handle all the paperwork and red tape. And the best part is that they work for you, not the insurance company. So if you hit any speed bumps during the application process, they'll take care of everything. That kind of service has earned Policy Genius a 5-star rating across over 1,600 reviews on Trustpilot and Google. So if you need life insurance, head on over to policygenius.com right now to get started. You could save 50% or more by comparing quotes. Policy Genius. When it comes to insurance, it's nice to get it right. Since we all love podcasts, I have a recommendation for you. One that you really should be listening to. It's The Jordan Harbinger Show. It's a podcast you should definitely check out if you're a fan of high-quality, fascinating podcasts hosted by interesting people. The show covers such a wide range of topics through weekly interviews with heavy-hitting guests. And there are a ton of great episodes you'll find interesting since you're a fan of this show. I'd recommend checking out the episode with Danny Trejo, Inmate Number 1, and also the one with Amanda Knox. There's an episode for everyone, though, no matter what you're into. The show covers stories like how a professional art forger somehow made millions of dollars while being chased by the feds and the mafia. Jordan's also done an episode all about birth control and how it can alter the partners we pick and how going on or off the pill can change elements of our personalities. I really enjoy this show, and I think you will as well. Search for The Jordan Harbinger Show. That's H-A-R-B as in boy, I-N as in Nancy, G-E-R on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And stay tuned to the end of this episode for a clip of Jordan's episode with Molly Bloom. The two men denied murdering the teenager. They told authorities they had taken him from his home, but that they had let him go. Emmett's body was found in the river that borders 2 counties, so it became a question of which government would prosecute the case. Tallahatchie County had jurisdiction, setting into motion Tallahatchie County Sheriff Clarence Strider testifying at trial for the defense.
Well, legally, a couple of interesting things happened because where the store incident is in Money, Mississippi, and that is in LaFleur County. So that's in one Mississippi county. And so when Emmett is reported missing, the local sheriff there, a man named George Smith, is the one who goes out and contacts Roy, goes and finds Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam. He's in one way responsible for helping to find the body. So that's one sheriff. But then the body's actually found in another county. So it's not found in the county where Money is, but instead found another county. It's found in Tallahatchie County, and that has another sheriff. His name is Harold Strider. So there's a couple of different sheriffs involved in this case. But once the body is discovered, then immediately Bryant and Milam are arrested for murder. So it's immediately that because they had told Sheriff Smith from LaFleur County that they had taken Emmett Till and kind of let him go. When the body is discovered, they're arrested for the murder. And then they're actually indicted fairly quickly, and then a trial will come up within a month. So as far as the discovery of the body, they are charged with murder. They are indicted for that. and the trial is set within a month. So that moves pretty quickly there. If the trial had happened under George Smith in LaFleur County, I think it would have been a little bit of a different trial. I don't think the outcome would have changed because Sheriff Strider in Tallahatchie County, who's supposed to be helping the prosecution, is actually very little help at all to the prosecution and ends up becoming one of the defense's best witnesses in the trial.
On September 19th, 1955, the famous trial was underway at the Tallahatchie County Courthouse in Sumner, Mississippi. It would not disappoint the media, who had traveled from the north to listen in on what at times became sensational testimony. From day one, it was clear that it would not be a fair trial. As Deidre Keller, the law school dean at Florida A&M, pointed out, there was an all-white jury.
Not only was it an all-white jury, it was a jury that was handpicked with the aid of law enforcement. So the sheriff's office was actually helping the defense handpick jurors that the defense could be pretty certain would see the issues to the benefit of the defendant. So that's problem number one. The reason that it was an all-white jury, though, is because there were so the requirement to sit on a jury at the time in Mississippi was that you had to be a registered voter. And that's actually still the case in many places. There were, of course, very few, if any, Black people registered to vote in Mississippi because of Jim Crow laws that basically excluded them from voting at that time in 1955. So those things are sort of baked into the system.
There was a jury selection on Monday. That jury selection went over a little bit on Tuesday morning. And then on Tuesday, when the trial is about to start, the prosecution finds out that there are witnesses potentially that could help their case to help to identify some of the men who were involved in the kidnapping. So all of a sudden, on the second day of the trial, there's potentially a whole new set of witnesses that nobody knew about until Monday night, Tuesday morning. And so the judge recesses the trial for the remainder of Tuesday so that the prosecution can actually find and talk to those missing witnesses.
There was uncertainty about what happened during Emmett's kidnapping. How many people were actually involved? Did Roy and J.W. act alone?
Sheriff Strider was very much on the defensive side. And one of the things that he did, in addition to testifying for the defense, is he had two key witnesses held under other names in jail at the time of the trial so that they couldn't be called as witnesses. So they couldn't be located because they were being held under false identities, effectively. These were two Black men who were involved in the kidnapping themselves. So if you read the accounts of the story, they both worked for the defendants in one way or another. One was like a handyman and one did trucking, I believe, with the defendants. And so they were effectively accomplices to the crime. And remember, the defense's theory of the case was, well, yeah, we kidnapped him, but we didn't kill him. We let him go in money. Their theory of the crime was that the body found was not Emmett Till's body and that he was still alive. So those two witnesses very well could have, confirmed that, in fact, Till was killed by the defendant.
But the two men were never brought into the courtroom as the proceedings were already underway.
There had been some suspicion that it wasn't just Milam and Bryant before they're tried, and then even during the case, there's some information here that more than these two men are involved. But that is something that really never gets picked up. We're doing a trial of Bryant and Milam, and they're the ones who are on trial. The case starts up again on Wednesday, and on Wednesday and Thursday, the entire case is laid out, and on Friday, the prosecution and defense have their closing arguments.
The defense's strategy at trial was to cast doubt that there had been a murder at all and argue that the body found couldn't be identified as Emmett Till. As you listen to this testimony, remember that Emmett had been abducted 3 days prior to the discovery of the body. Sheriff Strider, who was called to the stand as a witness for the defense, was asked about the condition of the body that had been pulled out of the river on August 31st, 1955. Well, it was in mighty bad shape, he testified. Just state the physical facts, not your own conclusions, Circuit Court Judge Curtis Swango told him. Quote, while the skin had slipped, I would say it had slipped on the entire body. The fingernails were gone from the left hand. A ring on the right hand was holding the skin that held the fingernails on that hand. And the entire body, the skin was slipping or it had completely gone off of it. It was so bad that we couldn't examine the body until the undertaker got there. And then he opened a deodorant bomb. And even then, we couldn't get too close, and he had to use a quart of some kind of liquid. John Whitten, the attorney from the defense, asked, what then, Mr. Strider, is your opinion based on your past experience in taking bodies from the river as to how long this particular body that was removed from the water on August 31st had been in the river? I would say at least 10 days, if not 15, the sheriff said. In fact, the sheriff testified the body was so decomposed, he couldn't identify the race of the corpse. Quote, the only way you could tell it was a colored person, and I wouldn't swear to it then, was just his hair. And I have seen white people that have kinky hair. And the hair had slipped in some places on the head there, but some of it was there. And what I saw, it showed it to be sort of kinky, or that of a Negro. The defense asked if it was possible to identify the body and recognize it as a particular person. Well, if one of my own boys had been missing, I couldn't really say if it was my own son or not, or anybody else's. I couldn't tell that. All I could tell is it was a human being, the sheriff said. Under cross-examination, the sheriff also admitted a body that had been badly beaten would decompose faster. The prosecution pointed out that the sheriff signed the death certificate. And that death certificate certified the fact that it was the body of Emmett Till. Isn't that correct? Robert Smith, special assistant to the district attorney, asked. No, I didn't certify that body as Emmett Till. I said it was a dead body. I had never seen Emmett Till before, and I couldn't swear it was Emmett Till because I didn't know Emmett Till or what he looked like, the sheriff said. The body was found wearing a ring. The sheriff said he had asked Mose Wright if that was Emmett's ring. His great-uncle wasn't sure. The sheriff sounded indignant in the court transcripts. Quote, and then I said to him, do you mean to tell me, Mose, that he has been staying there at your home for a week with this ring on his finger and eating there at the same table with you, and you don't even know this ring, or that you didn't notice he had a ring on his finger? And then he said, no, sir, I did not know about that ring, but my boys would know whether he was wearing that ring or not. That is what he said to me. But Emmett's mother countered the defense's claims. She had traveled from Chicago to be a witness at the trial. Emmett had been wearing his late father's ring, his mother confirmed in her testimony. She recognized the piece of white metal jewelry with the engravings of L.T., or Louise Till, for Emmett's father. In 1945, as a young boy, Emmett inherited the ring when his father had died. Back then, the ring was too big for him, so he wore it with Scotch tape. It was a treasured belonging that he had brought with him on his summer trip to the South. Before he had left for Mississippi, Mamie realized the ring was fitting Emmett better now that he was 14. He was growing into a man, she had realized that summer, before he left Chicago, before she had known that Emmett would not reach adulthood. In her court testimony, Mamie said she knew it was her son in the casket, despite his horrific injuries. Quote, I looked at the face very carefully. I looked at the ears and the forehead and the hairline and also the hair. And I looked at the nose and the lips and the chin. I just looked at it all over very thoroughly. And I was able to find out that it was my boy. And I knew definitely that it was my boy, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
The key testimony she gives is that she makes it clear that this is her son. She identifies him. She talks about how when his body was returned to Chicago and she had the casket open, she knew exactly who that was. So it was kind of the peremptory move by the prosecution to make sure that if the defense was going to try to establish that the body wasn't Emmett Till, they were going to have Emmett Till's mother there to say, it is my son. So that's another dramatic moment in the trial when she identifies her son.
Taking the stand next was a star witness who saw the kidnapping firsthand, Emmett's great-uncle, Mose Wright. Mose described what happened when the unannounced visitors showed up at 2 a.m. Quote, someone was at the front door and he was saying, preacher, preacher. And then I said, who is it? And then he said, this is Mr. Bryant. I want to talk to you and that boy. Mose opened the door. Well, Mr. Milam was standing there at the door with a pistol in his right hand, and he had a flashlight in his left hand, he said, remembering the man's big frame and bald head that stood out. District Attorney Gerald Chatham chimed in. Now stop there a minute, Uncle Mose. I want you to point out Mr. Milam if you see him here. There he is, Mose said, pointing. And do you see Mr. Bryant in here? Mose pointed again.
He testifies that J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant showed up at his house and kidnapped Emmett Till. He's actually asked in a very famous moment in the trial to identify Milam and Bryant. And I think he's first asked to identify Bryant, and he very famously points his finger and says, there he is. A rare moment in Mississippi that a black man would accuse a white man in a trial of a crime. He points right at him and says, there he is. It's a very famous moment because not only what he testifies, but the judge had prohibited anybody from taking photographs during the trial. But a photographer named Ernest Withers out of Memphis got his camera out and snapped a picture. And so we actually have a picture of Moses Wright standing up and pointing at one of the two men and identifying them as the kidnappers. So that's a very dramatic moment when Mose Wright does that, but it also establishes that J.W. Milam and Bryant and Roy Bryant were the kidnappers of Emmett Till. Now, the defense challenges Moses Wright and gets him on a couple difficulties with how dark it was and how he identifies them. But that is a key moment because it clearly establishes that these two men kidnapped Emmett Till that night.
J.W. told Mose that, I want that boy that done the talking down at Money. They entered the house and went into the room where Emmett was sleeping with his relative. If this isn't the right boy, then we are going to bring him back. If it isn't the right boy, we are going to bring him back and put him in the bed, Mose was told. J.W. ordered Emmett to get up. The teenager obediently sat on the side of the bed and got dressed. Before the men left, Mose got a chilling warning from one of the intruders. Quote, he asked me if I know anybody there, and I told him, no, sir, I don't know you. And then he said to me, how old are you? And then I said, 64. And then he said, well, if you know any of us here tonight, then you will never live to get to be 65. Deidre Keller, the law school dean at Florida A&M, talked about Mose's tremendous courage to take the stand against two white men.
When they came and took Emmett from his house, they told him, if you tell anyone, we'll kill you. And then they did, in fact, kill Emmett. And so at this point, he knows exactly who he's dealing with. These are very clearly men who are not going to hesitate to seek retribution. And so I think that had to have taken a tremendous amount of courage.
Mose testified that one of the men ordered his wife back into bed, telling her, you get back in that bed, and I want to hear the springs. Mose's wife got back into bed, but pleaded for Emmett's life. Mose testified, quote, she said that we will pay you whatever you want to charge if you will just release him. She said that we would pay them for whatever he might have done if they would just let him go. And what did they say? The district attorney asked. They didn't say a word, Mose said. And did they remain there after that? Well, just for a few minutes, and then they walked out, Mose said. Mose said he then went onto the porch. Before Mr. Milam and Mr. Bryant got to the car with Emmett Till, Did you hear them make any statements or ask anybody out there any question in that car? The district attorney asked. I sure did, Mose testified. Will you tell the jury what that was? They asked if this was the boy, and someone said yes, Mose recounted. The voice sounded like it came from a woman. After the car drove away, Mose remained on the porch for more than 20 minutes in the darkness in the moonless night. He didn't testify about the emotions he felt, standing there after he had seen his young family member abducted from his own home. Now, Uncle Mose, have you since that night ever seen Emmett Till alive? The district attorney asked. No, sir, Mose said. Mose, a black man, had just done something brave in the Deep South during that era. He had testified against 2 white defendants. Afterwards, he feared his life was at risk.
Mose Wright, who testifies against these white men in court, needs police protection. He's kept at a safe house, far away from trial. He has to come in, testify, and then he leaves. And he said, they can have my land. I'm never coming back to Mississippi.
Listening to Moses' testimony was a packed courthouse. The image of Emmett Till lying in the casket had caught the press's attention, and black journalists, who were segregated in the courtroom and forced to sit in their own designated area, were covering it. The small town in Mississippi now had an international audience.
It took on national significance, right, because of that image that went around the country. Charles Diggs, who was a black congressman out of around the Detroit area, representing people out of the Detroit area, came down to the trial. Most of the major national black newspapers came down for the trial. So there were people from Amsterdam News, some of these other papers, right? New York Amsterdam News, Chicago Defender, et cetera, right? Pittsburgh Courier, some of these other major newspapers were there.
Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam would not testify at their own trial, although their wives did. And that meant 21-year-old Carolyn Bryant, whose encounter with Emmett appeared to be the motive, took the stand. She was called as a witness for the defense, as attorney Sidney Carpenter asked her about her height and weight and how many children she had, perhaps to paint the picture of a small, demure mother. Carolyn was 5'2", 103 pounds, and a mother of 2. She and Roy had been married for nearly 4 years as the trial began. At 8 p.m. on August 24th, Carolyn was alone in the store. She said 14-year-old Emmett, whom she referred to as this N-word man, stopped in to look at candy. She reached up to the top shelf to get the candy he wanted. She stuck her right hand out for the money, she testified. He caught my hand, she said, recalling his strong grip. She tried to jerk her hand away. Just what did he say when he grabbed your hand? The defense attorney asked. He said, how about a date, baby? When you freed yourself, what happened then? Carolyn said, I turned around and started back to the back of the store. He came on down that way, and then he caught me at the cash register. She demonstrated in the courtroom how he grabbed her, putting his, quote, left hand on my waist, and he put his other hand over on the other side. Emmett then asked her, at least by Carolyn's account, what's the matter, baby? Can't you take it? You needn't be afraid of me. Carolyn said she struggled to free herself against the teenager who was a few inches taller than her. She testified Emmett then said something else to her, something so profane she refused to repeat it in the courtroom. She wouldn't even say what letter the horrible word began with. In other words, it's an unprintable word? The defense attorney asked. Yes, Carolyn said. Did he say anything after that one unprintable word? Yes. And what was that? She said he told her he had been with white women before. Then another person, again she used the N-word to describe him, came into the store and led Emmett out by the arm. When he went out the door, did he say anything further after he had made these obscene remarks? The defense attorney asked. He turned around and said goodbye, she said. Carolyn's story kept going. She said she rushed out to get her pistol. Emmett was still on the front porch. He then whistled at her. Did you have any white men anywhere around there to protect you that night? The defense attorney asked. No, Carolyn said. Her 24-year-old husband was out of town.
But her version in court, she's saying things that nobody had really brought up until then. They had talked about, there had been some discussion in the paper, this boy from Chicago had come into the store and said something inappropriate or even whistled. That was out pretty quickly in the press. But when she got up in the trial, she talked about how this young man asked her for a date and had used rough language that she could not repeat in court, and that when she tried to move away from him, he kind of put his hand on her, around her waist. And so there are all kinds of details that she introduces in court that had never really been in the papers before by any kind of witnesses they had talked to, some young men who had been outside the store. It's clear that what she's trying to do is develop a picture of Emmett Till that makes his actions seem more aggressive and maybe is setting up this idea that what J.W., Milam, and Bryant were doing was punishing, or I don't think she wants the people in court to think their husband and brother-in-law have anything to do with this, but she's setting up this idea that Emmett Till is aggressive and brash and steps way over the line in what happened. And so I don't know how much, I think people believed it because they believed her, but then after the trial, when a lot of investigative reporting happens, it becomes clear that she's exaggerated what happened in the store that day.
Carolyn didn't face cross-examination from prosecutors, so she was swiftly excused from the witness stand. All of what she had said in the courtroom occurred before an empty juror's box because Judge Swango had ordered the jury out of the room during her testimony. Chris Matris explains why, calling it one of the most interesting moments during the trial.
And this is where you get a sense of how Judge Swango is trying to create a fair atmosphere in the courtroom. When it's time for the defense to make its case, it wants to call Carolyn Bryant on the stand. Immediately, Chatham and his team, they object. And they object because the case they make against Milam and Bryant starts the evening that they show up at Moses Wright's house to kidnap Emmett Till. They have not made any connection at all to what happened at the store a couple days before that. So their objection is, we didn't bring that in, so this is unrelated to the kidnapping and murder. So they're asking the judge to not let her testify. The defense team wants her to get on the stand because she's going to tell kind of a fabricated tale about what this young boy did to her in the store on Wednesday. Well, the judge kind of weighs both sides on this, and he says, I will let her testify, but I will remove the jury. So he actually, on Wednesday when she testifies, the jury is not there to hear what she has to say. So although she does give witness or testimony at the trial, it's not something that the jury would have considered in its verdict. So that was an interesting decision by the judge to allow her to speak, but to not allow her to influence the jury.
For the defense, Carolyn's testimony, albeit to no jury, was still put on the official court record. No jurors heard Carolyn, but the media certainly did.
Just remember, this is a trial, and yes, what's going on is going on inside that courthouse, but you've got 70 reporters. You've got newspapers from all over the country. You have a newspaper reporter from England there. You got international focus on this case. And so part of this is getting Carolyn Bryant's testimony into the record, gets it out in the newspapers the next day. So it does get that their version of events distributed to the larger public. But I think what Swango is doing there is not letting that at least affect the jurors.
J.W. Milam's wife was also called as a witness, but her testimony was brief, and she wasn't asked questions on the incident in the store, nor what happened that night when her husband was accused of going to Mose Wright's home. She only gave brief details on their private life, saying she and J.W. were parents of 2 children, and her husband had won a Purple Heart Award after he was injured in the Army while fighting overseas in Germany. The trial ended on a Friday, as both sides gave their closing arguments.
The lawyer, defending Milam and Bryant said, talked to the jury, in the closing arguments, I know every last one of you white Anglo-Saxon Protestants has the strength or the determination to do what's right. In the closing argument, even though Mose Wright points to these guys, he said in the trial, he said, Darhe, those are the folks who did it, right? Points to Milam and Bryant. His testimony, like a whole lot of the testimony for Emmett Till, was essentially not considered of relevance, and they appealed to the jurors' race and the defense of their lifestyle.
District Attorney Gerald Chatham presented closing arguments for the prosecution.
I think Chatham did a very good job. His closing arguments were lauded in the press and in much of the African-American press. He makes a very powerful plea for people in Mississippi to look past their prejudices and to convict. I mean, he's not holding back.
It wasn't enough. After 1 week of testimony, the all-white jury decided in 67 minutes to acquit Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam. "We wouldn't have taken so long if we hadn't stopped to drink pop," a juror was quoted as telling reporters afterwards. The jury disregarded Mose's words, pinning J.W. and Roy as the perpetrators who took Emmett the last night he was ever seen alive. Ultimately, no one would ever legally be held responsible for Emmett's death. And no one would ever be held responsible for his kidnapping either.
They actually are going to come up on kidnapping charges, because remember, they also confessed to kidnapping. So they're tried for murder and they're not convicted of that. But then a grand jury has to meet to decide whether they are going to be indicted for kidnapping. The grand jury meets and says it will not indict them for kidnapping. So even though they've admitted to that, the grand jury in Mississippi, there decides not to prosecute them for kidnapping. So they kind of get off on the second crime. They don't have to face another trial. But then not long after that, a journalist named William Bradford Huey shows up in Mississippi because he believes he can get Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam to tell him the truth about what happened. And so actually in October, a month and a half or so after the case, Huey meets with Milam and Bryant, and also, we believe, Carol and Bryant, and he gets a confession from Milam and Bryant about the details of what they did to Emmett Till that night. And so he pays them, we think about $4,000 or so. He gets their confession and publishes their confession in Look magazine in January of 1956. And so after the trial, 4 months later, their confession appears, and it's told kind of as a version of events where Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam kidnap Emmett Till and torture him and throw his body in the river. So they actually confess to the crime a few months after the not guilty verdict. But what happens, of course, in the community that they're in, they are kind of ostracized after that because they basically confessed to a murder that the community in Mississippi, the white community, had defended them and said they were innocent, and then they went ahead and turned around and confessed to the murder. And after that, I think Roy Bryant lost his standing a lot. Lost his store. J.W. Milam lost a lot of work, and eventually both men ended up leaving the county.
After the trial, Emmett's mother went on a speaking tour across the country that was sponsored by the NAACP. It was her way of keeping her son's memory alive. She succeeded. The world did not forget Emmett Till's name. Exactly 65 years to the day of his funeral, the Commission on Chicago Landmarks voted unanimously to give his childhood home in Chicago preliminary landmark status, according to the Chicago Sun-Times in September 2020. 100 days after Emmett's funeral, a woman called into action refused to move to the back of the bus.
Just 100 days later, right, Rosa Parks does not give up her seat on that bus in Montgomery. And then we have the birth of, the civil rights movement under the leadership of Martin Luther King Jr. And so in a lot of ways, that the beating, the torture, and the killing of 14-year-old Emmett Till does give birth to we talk about Rosa Parks giving birth to it, but the outrage, the horror, the great concern for the safety of Black people and their rights in America following the display of Emmett Till's mutilated body in his casket also is a key component to the birth of the civil rights movement.
Even though Roy Bryant, J.W. Milam, and others who were part of the September 1955 trial died over the years, the FBI finally conducted an independent investigation in 2004 and exhumed Emmett's body. It was clear from the heavily redacted report that Roy and J.W. had not acted alone, although in the end, it would not matter. The FBI released a statement, quote, "In March 2006, the FBI announced that information developed in its exhaustive investigation confirmed the Department of Justice's earlier conclusion that the 5-year statute of limitations on any potential federal criminal civil rights violation had expired, thereby precluding federal prosecution of this case."
So the reopening did get us something. It got confirmation that the body was, in fact, the body of Emmett Till. In other words, we can lay to rest the fiction that the defense initially tried to put forth, that it wasn't Emmett's body taken from the Tallahatchie. So I think that's a positive thing that came out of the reopening. But to reopen a case 50 years later it's very unlikely, despite the amount of media coverage and the importance of the case in in American history, it's still very unlikely to be able to prosecute that case successfully, right? Because you just think, the two main defendants had both died by that time. Both Milam and Bryant had died of cancer in the late 80s, early 90s, if memory serves. So we're past the point where we can bring them to justice, right? But also think about how many fewer witnesses are going to be available. It's not at all surprising that, very often justice deferred is justice denied.
After decades of silence, Carolyn Bryant finally broke her silence. In old age, she spoke out and recanted her testimony she had given under oath at trial. Nothing that boy did could ever justify what happened to him, Carolyn Bryant Donaham said in an interview for the 2017 book, The Blood of Emmett Till. The revelations were obvious and lacked an emotional depth, criticized Miami Herald columnist Leonard Pitts. He wrote, quote, "You keep hoping for more, hoping to hear her wrestle with her crime, explain how she could have done what she did, and how she lives with herself now. But in the end, the admission is all she gives, the only glimpse you get into how she views her role in one of history's signature atrocities, the brutal lynching of a 14-year-old Chicago boy who supposedly got fresh with her one fateful day in her family's store in the nothing town of Money, Mississippi, and the acquittal of his killers, Ms. Donham's husband and his half-brother. Nothing that boy did could ever justify what happened to him, she says now, as if that hadn't been glaringly obvious for 63 years, ever since Till's bloated, mutilated corpse was fished from the Tallahatchie River. 65 years after Emmett Till's death, some say the infamous case rings true today, pointing to the social inequality that still exists. Like when a young man like Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida was killed in 2012, because he was presumed guilty by a vigilante who was later acquitted. Just like the photograph of Emmett's graphically beaten corpse had caused outrage for a generation, a new generation is horrified and called to action by video footage and graphic images they see today.
I think the protests that we're seeing right now are not unlike the protests that followed Emmett Till's killing. When you think about the killing of Philando Castile, which was, of course, recorded by his girlfriend, the killing of George Floyd, which was recorded by a bystander, the killing of Laquan McDonald, which was recorded, I believe, on police cameras. So we have all of these images that tell their own story. It's one thing to hear a narrative. It is something else to see with your own eyes a police officer kneel on George Floyd. That is, in many ways, undeniable. And the things that we learn, I think that the things that we learned from Mamie Till's really courageous act of leaving her son's casket open was just how much violence there was, how badly beaten and tortured, really, Emmett had been. You can describe that all day, but that picture stands as its own conviction.
And that's all for today's episode. As always, I'd love to know what you think about this case. Let me know by joining the conversation on Instagram @CourtJunkie, by tweeting me @CourtJunkiePod, or by emailing me at podcast@courtjunkie.com. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Russon. A special thank you to everyone she interviewed about this case, including Chris Matris, Ayesha Bell Hardaway, Lewis Woods, and Deidre Keller. To hear Court Junkie episodes ad-free and to find out how you can get access to additional Court Junkie bonus episodes, go to courtjunkie.com/support. And don't forget to join my YouTube channel, where I'm uploading some behind-the-scenes videos along with some Q&As with other members of my Court Junkie team. That's youtube.com/courtjunkie. Thanks again for listening. Until next time. If you're a business owner, you don't need us to tell you that running a business is tough, but you might be making it harder on yourself than necessary. Don't let QuickBooks and spreadsheets slow you down anymore. It's time to upgrade to NetSuite. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. Ditch the spreadsheets and all of the old software you've outgrown. Now is the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need all in one place instantaneously. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite. Join the over 21,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with a free product tour at netsuite.com/court. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/court. That's netsuite.com/court.
I went to LA and needed to get the first job that I could and got hired by this guy who was a pretty demanding boss. I was his personal assistant. He said, "I need you to serve drinks at my poker game." So I'm like, okay, great. And I bring my playlist and my cheese plate, and I'm thinking, the players are going to be these overgrown frat boys. But then Ben Affleck walks in the room, and Leo DiCaprio, and a politician that was very well recognized, and heads of studios, heads of banks. And all of a sudden I had this light bulb moment that poker is my Trojan horse. I just need to control and have power over this game because it has this incredible hold over these people. Why do these guys, with their access to anyone and anything, come to this dingy basement to play this game?
What is the most money you've seen someone lose in one night?
$100 million.
How did the mob get involved?
Around Christmas, door opened and this guy that I'd never seen before pushed his way in and stuck a gun in my mouth. Then he beat the hell out of me and he kind of gave me this speech about how if I told anyone about this or if I didn't comply, then they would take a trip to Colorado to see my family. Then the feds got involved, and the first thing they did was they took all my money. I moved back to LA. I'd gotten a pretty decent job. 10 days later, I get a call in the middle of the night. This is Agent so-and-so from the FBI. You need to come out with your hands up. I walk into my hallway. When my eyes adjusted to the high beam flashlights, I saw 17 FBI agents, semi-automatic weapons pointed at me.
If you want to learn more about building rapport and generating the type of trust that Molly Bloom needed to run her multi-million-dollar operation and hear about how it all came to an end, check out episode 120 of The Jordan Harbinger Show.